A millionaire just said he would rather pay $24 in rent than $24 in a mortgage. And another millionaire has been renting for 20 years while getting richer than homeowners. Meanwhile, everyone's telling you that renting is throwing away money. Someone's lying to you. And I'm about to prove who. 5 viral TikToks, 5 different millionaires and experts, completely different advice about buying versus renting. And the math I'm about to show you will change everything you believe about home ownership. Starting with a guy who just broke the internet with 2 numbers. This is either the dumbest thing or smartest thing I've ever heard about real estate. $24. That's the number he uses. Listen to his logic.
A house is not a good investment. I have arguments with people constantly. I'm like, okay, I'm done talking about it. You can be right. I'll be wrong if you want me to be wrong. You go back to your house is such a good investment. Nobody ever had financial freedom because they bought a house. That's my point. And I am so pro real estate. Like I got real estate agents that are hating on me right now. They're like, you're talking people out of houses. No, I'm not. I'm talking people into real estate.
You're saying buy them and rent them. Don't buy them and live in them.
Yeah, buy them and rent them out. Yeah. And rent where you live. Go rent some spanky, swanky, crazy, stupid, ridiculous. Spend more money on rent than you would your house and use the money from the house to go buy places where people pay you rent.
Wait. Did he just say I can get out of rent in 10 months but be stuck in a mortgage for 30 years? That's actually brilliant. Here's what everyone is missing. He's not talking about the amount. He's talking about the commitment. $2,400 in rent, you can leave anytime. Move for a job, downsize in a recession, upgrade when you succeed. $2,400 mortgage, you're locked in for 30 years. And then he said something that's going to trigger everyone. Your home should not even go towards your net worth statement. But he's wrong here because that's basic accounting 101. However, a house does cost you money and you want assets that produce income, not costs, like property tax, insurance, maintenance, etc. It is not an investment. It's an expense with a fancy name. Score 7 out of 10. Controversial, but mathematically sound. Speaking of math, the next millionaire is about to blow your mind with actual numbers. He made more renting in Manhattan than he would have buying. 100% of the top 50 cities, it's cheaper to rent than buy. And this millionaire has the receipts.
Renting can actually be a better financial decision. In 100% of the top 50 metro cities in the US, it is currently cheaper to rent than to buy.
Stop. You're kidding.
100%. And let me tell people the most shocking thing of all. I've been renting for 20 years. I've made more money renting than I would have owning. A lot more.
Because you're just taking all the money you save renting and investing in.
Yeah, let me give you a specific example to put it all in context. Talking about Manhattan here, when I lived here pre-COVID, I lived in an apartment and there was a building right out my window, same view, same square footage, same number of bedrooms and bathrooms, very similar. Let's just pretend that my apartment costs $3,000 a month to rent. Okay, let's just pretend. That apartment would have cost $6,600 a month to own. In other words, more than 2 times more expensive.
Yep.
So what did I do? I go, why the hell would I buy that? I take all the money, so like $3,600 a month in this example, and I invested it. Mm-hmm. And over time, that ended up growing so much that it made way more than I ever would have had by owning. I don't believe in making the biggest purchase of our life without running numbers and simply for status reasons.
Stop. We need to break this down because those numbers change everything. His apartment, $3,000 to rent. Same apartment to buy, $6,600 per month. That's $3,600 extra per month if he bought. So what did he do? He invested the difference of $3,600 every single month. $3,600 times 12 months is $43,200 per year. Times 20 years equals $864,000. But wait, that's not even counting the growth. At 10% returns in the stock market, that $3,600 monthly becomes $2.6 million after 20 years. The apartment he didn't buy may be worth $1.5 million today. He literally made an extra $1 million by renting. And here's what nobody talks about. Maintenance, landlord's problem. Property tax increase, landlord's problem. New roof, landlord's problem. Market crash, he can move to a cheaper place. The homeowner, stuck with all of it. I know best. Score 10 out of 10. This is how wealthy people actually think. But okay, maybe that's just Manhattan. What about normal cities? This next rule seems too simple to be true. This dad claims there's a simple rule, 3 years. That's it. That's the whole strategy. So let's see.
I'm moving out from my parents. Should I buy or rent a house? Well, many people think renting's a waste of money. Oh, okay, so I should buy it then. Well, on the other hand, buying it could also be a waste of money. Now I'm even more confused. What's the answer? You can probably save money by renting if you stay there 3 years or less. Any more than that, you might as well buy the house. Thanks, Money Dad. I always make him look so smart.
3 years or less, rent. More than 3 years, buy. You know what? This actually makes sense when you look at the math. Closing costs when buying a home, 2 to 3% of the home's value. Closing costs when selling, 6 to 8%, including realtor fees. Total transaction costs, about 10%. On a $300,000 home, that's $30,000 in just fees. If you're only staying there 3 years, you need the house to appreciate by 10%. That's just to break even. Plus the first 3 years of a mortgage, mostly interest. So yeah, the 3-year rule actually checks out. And my brother was a good example of this. He rented because he moved to 5 large cities in a matter of 8 years. But I lived in 2 cities over 10 years and I bought both times. So both situations made sense. Score 8 out of 10. Simple, practical, and mostly accurate. But what if I told you someone's daughter quit her corporate job because she followed a strategy that goes against everything we were taught? VTSAX and rent, that's the entire strategy. His daughter followed this and now has, wait for it, fuck you money. Listen to this.
You really believe you're telling everybody on the internet right now that's my age or younger, VTSAX and rent?
Yes. And that's what I tell my daughter, and that's what she's doing. She's in her early 30s. She just quit her corporate job last fall. I don't know if that's permanent or if it's just a temporary hiatus, but she at least has fuck you money the way we defined it earlier, that she can make that kind of bold decision, because she didn't make any silly decisions like buying a house and becoming house poor and being dependent on a paycheck to pay for all of those things. So yeah, building wealth is your key goal. Then no, owning a house is not going to contribute to that. If, on the other hand, you want to own a house because it'll provide a certain lifestyle that you find desirable, maybe a yard for your kids or whatever, then that's great. That's a lifestyle decision. It's not a financial decision. Don't confuse yourself.
I want to close this out with a very simple story that you open the book with. It's the parable of the monk and the minister.
Right. His daughter quit her corporate job at just 30 years old, in her early 30s. Not because she's rich, but because she has fuck you money. And you know what that means? She can say no to bad bosses, to toxic jobs, to anything. How? VTSAX and rent. VTSAX is a total stock market index fund. Averages 10% annually. Rent, no maintenance, no property tax, and complete flexibility. But here's the line that hit different. Owning a house is a lifestyle decision, not a financial one. You want a yard for your kids? Great, buy a house. You want to build wealth? That's different. The average homeowner has 67% of their net worth in their home. The average millionaire, less than 20%. See the pattern? Poor people, house is their main asset. Rich people, house is where they live. Stocks are their asset. Score 9 out of 10. This is generational wealth thinking. Now, everything I just showed you, Dave Ramsey is about to explain why it actually works with math that nobody wants to hear. Dave Ramsey, love him or hate him, he's worth $200 million. And he's about to explain something about real estate that changes everything. This is long but crucial.
If my money is more effective in real estate than it is in the stock market, since if I buy a rental property, for example, it actually generates cash, whereas the only value that you get from a stock is whenever you sell it, and if somebody wants that particular certificate of stock.
Well, or if you buy a dividend-paying stock, which I don't buy single stocks anyway, but we can discuss the philosophy or the concepts behind it. Generally speaking, you would make a lot, if you do a good job with it, you would make a lot more rate of return on real estate. But it involves more hassle, more of your time. Even if you hire a management company or whatever, you've still got more time than just buying a mutual fund and throwing it in the drawer and forget it. Okay, and you get the statements on your email, once a quarter, once a month, or whatever. You have zero hassle factor buying a mutual fund or buying stocks, unless you're going to try to buy and sell them, which I would never recommend. But a buy and hold strategy on real estate, while it generates cash flow, It should outperform stocks, but it has more hassle. It outperforms mainly because it's an imperfect market in terms of, that's an economic term you may be familiar with. A perfect market is one where all buyers and sellers have exactly the same information and the exact same access to buy. And so the stock market is closer to a perfect market than real estate. Real estate, each item is unique. It's unique to a certain area, and all buyers and sellers never have even close to the same amount of information or belief about a piece of real estate. And so real estate gives you a lot more opportunity to get a bargain, in other words, and and if you're willing to invest the time, you should make more on it. Real estate creates three types of return. One is, as you said, increase in value, and cash flow is 2, which is the rental income on it. And 3 is you get to depreciate it. So you actually get a tax break that covers a portion or all of your rent that comes in, and that actually has a cash value to it. So when you put those 3 together, that's called an internal rate of return. Have you ever heard that?
Yes.
Okay. So an IRR on a piece of real estate that is under $1 million, a small apartment, a small a basic home, a small office or something like that, your IRRs ought to be north of 15%. Mine are on almost everything I own that's income producing. And your cash on cash in most cases with a typical piece of real investment property would be 8 to 12%, somewhere in there. Your cash on cash alone would be that. Now, again, on stocks, you got 2 possible places of return. One is the increase in value, and 2 is the 2 is possible dividend payouts, which are profits shared with the owners of the company. And when you're a stockholder, you're an owner of the company, so you could get dividend payout stocks, and you'd have a cash flow with that kind of a thing, and you'd have the increases in value. So in both markets, though, people make the statements that you were making, that it's artificially high, or it's ridiculous, or there's a bubble, or there's no way that supports that, when in reality, there's a few times that that's the case. We had a tech bubble in 1999, the dot-com rage, where people were buying stocks on companies that had never made a profit. So that was ridiculous, obviously, and they shot through the roof. Most of those didn't survive. A few name brands that are household names did survive, like, for instance, Amazon. But by and large, the stock market overall is never overpriced over the scope of time. There may be a moment in time that it is, or there may be a moment in time that it's underpriced. I'll give you an example. You remember the oil glut, because the ships were all parked off the shores because nobody was driving, and oil went down to $0 a barrel, or sub-zero a barrel, about 5 weeks ago. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that drove Exxon's stock way down. It was artificially low because it was a temporary situation. So the numbers didn't justify how low it was. Other times something hypes up and the numbers are artificially high. But over the scope of time, they generally correct back and forth. And, you can look at PE ratios, profit to earnings ratios, and you can look at the book value of the company, the assets that they own, and compare that to the stock prices and the outstanding shares. And, most of this stuff's pretty close. To say that the Dow's at 30,000 and it just cannot maintain. Why? Because you emotionally can't accept it? When the math is actually there? That's absurd. So that's like saying, this piece of real estate is never worth this. Well, the rents coming in off of it actually say it is worth that. And so, I'm looking at a cap rate on my NOI, my net operating income on this piece of real estate says it is worth that. And so, and 7 people right around it have just paid similar prices for that. So, yeah, it is probably worth that. Just because, when I was a boy, that piece of property sold for, 100 times less does not mean that it's not worth that today, just because I can't emotionally keep up with the prices. There's math on all of it. Now, again, there's examples of individual companies on stocks or individual pieces of real estate where they are overpriced or where they are underpriced. But by and large, you have a better chance of sneaking up on a deal with a piece of real estate. I like real estate. I've got a bunch of it.
So let me translate what Dave just said because this is gold. Real estate can beat stocks, but here's the catch. 1, more hassle, even with property management. You're dealing with tenants, repairs, vacancies. 2, imperfect market. Real estate is inefficient, but that means opportunity if you know what you're doing. 3, the returns he mentioned, 15% IRR. That's if you find deals below market, manage properly, and get lucky with appreciation. How he always says you win on the buy. The average homeowner buying their personal residence, they're not getting 15%. They're getting 3 to 4% appreciation, maybe. Stocks, 10% average, 0 work, and completely passive. Real estate, maybe 15%, tons of work, and active management. But here's what he said that everyone missed. The stock market is closer to a perfect market. Translation, you can't outsmart the S&P 500. It's too efficient. But real estate, you can find deals if you put the work in. For 99% of people, they won't put the work in. Score 10 out of 10. Most honest take on stocks versus real estate. 5 TikToks, 5 perspectives. Here's what they're all actually saying. The $24 guy, flexibility beats commitment. Manhattan Millionaire, math beats emotion. 3-year rule, transaction costs matter. VTSAX dad, simplicity beats complexity. Dave Ramsey, effort determines returns. So here's the real answer to rent versus buy. If you're staying less than 5 years, rent. If you can invest the difference, rent. If you want flexibility, rent. If you hate maintenance, rent. If you want stability for kids, buy. If you'll stay 10 plus years, buy. If you want to renovate, buy. If real estate's your passion, buy. But here's what nobody tells you. The average millionaire in America, they rent expensive houses and buy cheap index funds. The average middle class person, they buy expensive houses and rent cheap apartments when they're broke. So which pattern are you following? Calculate this right now. Your rent or mortgage payment multiplied by 12 multiply by 30 years. That number you just calculated, that's what you're actually paying for housing. For most people, it's over a couple $1 million. The question isn't to rent or buy. The question is, will that $1 million make you wealthy or just give you a place to live? Comment below, what's your monthly housing cost? Because next week, I'm showing you how I turned a rent payment into a tax write-off while building $1 million portfolio. And yes, it's completely legal. Subscribe if you want that breakdown. And remember, your house is not an investment. Your investments are investments. I'll see you next week.